So little known fact, perhaps, that I dug up, you were a journalism major as an undergrad. And so I got to ask you about the news that the top leadership of Stars and Stripes has been removed. Tell us, first of all, about your relationship with Stars and Stripes as someone who served something like almost 4 decades. What is Stars and Stripes for our viewers, and what does it mean to coverage of the military when someone reaches in and takes the editorial leadership out?
Yeah, I will tell you, of all the questions you've asked today, Frank, this one may be the one that concerns me the most. You would think maybe the Iran war and others, but this continuing degradation and denigration of the press is a real problem. When I was the chancellor of the University of Texas system, I was going to make a speech at the School of Journalism one night, and that was the day that President Trump had come out and said that the press was the enemy of the American people. And so, needless to say, everybody in the audience had heard this. They were concerned about this, and I made a comment that I thought his comment, the president's comment, that the press was the enemy of the American people was the greatest threat to democracy in my lifetime. And I had a lot of people saying, really? You thought that was a greater threat than communism or, and terrorism? I said, yeah, absolutely, because this is a threat that's coming from within, not from without. And a lot of people were a little dismissive when I made that comment. They're not dismissive anymore. When you see what the president has done in terms of going after the media and cowering anybody that kind of speaks badly about him. You see what happens in the press conferences where he denigrates, every reporter that asks a hard question. And the Stars and Stripes, this is just a continuing thread in his and the Pentagon's effort in this case to make all of the media kind of a propaganda for Trump. So the Stars and Stripes, and my father was in the Air Force during World War II, Army Air Corps during World War II, had a career in the Air Force. And I grew up in France in my younger years. Mm-hmm. And Stars and Stripes was the only paper we had. And so, and it was a newspaper back then, of course. And of course, as a little kid, I read it for the comics that were in it and those sorts of things. But my parents and the other officers and enlisted that were there read it because they knew that Stars and Stripes would tell the truth. Yes, there was a lot of chest beating and flag waving, but they did not hesitate to tell about conditions, bad conditions in certain casernes and certain bases and certain things. And were we getting this right? And historically, in my time in the military, and I also served overseas in the Philippines and in Germany, and Stars and Stripes was kind of the paper I went to find out what was going on in the military. And you could always rely on the Stars and Stripes to be unbiased. Again, that's not to say that there wasn't certainly a patriotic tenor to it. Yeah. But once again, the editorial staff did not hesitate to, put things in the Stars and Stripes that were controversial. And it was important for the leaders who read the Stars and Stripes to read these editorials that may have been controversial to find out what was really going on and to see. And that was the only way you were going to fix things, is if people told you the truth. And you could find the truth in the Stars and Stripes. And so I think this, whether he was fired or stepped down, the editor of the Stars and Stripes, and then a couple of other key players, reporters, this sends a bad signal to military magazines, but also to the press that, if you're not going to toe the line, we're going to sue you. We're going to dismiss you if we have the opportunity to do that. Right. We're going to change things. And, the First Amendment is the First Amendment for a reason, because freedom of speech is that important to who we are as a country, as a democracy, as a republic. And so these continual threats on freedom of speech and freedom of expression and, these truly, truly concern me.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. If you're so fearful of the truth being reported that you have to control the reporting, maybe you're doing something wrong. And we've seen that thing throughout. We saw, of course, earlier, the typical reporters who cover the Pentagon being pushed literally out of the building. Yeah. And this rather embarrassing situation where you see reporters standing in the rain outside the Pentagon reporting on a story. It's
Well,
unbelievable.
let me just another quick segue on that. So during Desert Storm, kind of the first big war we'd had in a while, and of course the reporters wanted to be embedded. And most of the services had kind of minders for the reporter. Yes, you're going to have an escort, but the Marine Corps said, you know what? We're going to give the reporters free rein on the ships with our Marines. And, if the Marines are complaining about something, or if they're dropping F-bombs every other word, or if they're, that's okay. Because if the reporters report that the Marines aren't happy about something, that's something we ought to know about.
Wow.
If we're not doing something well, that's something we ought to know about. But here's what's going to happen is, my guess is those reporters are going to sit down with these young Marines, and they'll bitch about the chow, and they'll complain about this, and they may talk about their captain. But at the end of the day, they're going to find out they were proud Marines and proud of what they were doing. And that's the story that will resonate. The Marine Corps is exactly right. The fact of the matter is, yes, you got some bad news coming out of these young Marines, but the preponderance of news was good, because they were great young men and women doing a job that was important for the country. And again, this idea that we're going to put reporters out there and let them report the truth, as painful as it might be, is an important part of, frankly, who we are as Americans and who we are as a military.